So like this many months in, we're starting to see the effects of what it's like for children to be masking for so long, to not have social interactions with other people, to not, read facial expressions as they're, growing and developing as human beings. And I looked through all the research that's just kind of come out in the last few weeks, maybe a month or two. So we are seeing massive speech delays in kids. We're seeing lower reading scores, lower scores in general across the board. Part of that has to do with remote learning as well.
Right.
Social isolation, depression, anxiety, other developmental delays, like, emotional developmental delays. And, these two plastic surgeons from Europe, they're starting to hypothesize that, if you have too young of kids are wearing too tight of masks for too long, they start to get protruding ears.
So we're making a bunch of ugly kids.
We're making a bunch of ugly kids, which is the least of all those problems I listed, but still, physical issues, emotional issues, psychological issues, social issues. Like children are not safer. And this should all be, we should take into consideration with all that they have almost zero chance of dying from COVID.
Exactly.
The flu is more dangerous. Yeah. It's ridiculous what Biden is doing.
Right. So now they have almost zero chance of dying from COVID, but 50% spike in illiteracy and things like that. So it's it's always a question of do the benefits outweigh the costs?
Yeah. And, my wife works in behavioral therapy, and so she works a lot with kids that do, they have speech issues, speech delays, kids with autism and things like that. And this is just having them mask, having those kind of kids that, they need a little extra help to get on to, to develop as members of society. Masking completely stunts their development in ways that we probably won't even comprehend for decades.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's complete. Well, it's like even if you take someone who's neurotypical or what have you, you're seeing the same delays there too. You're seeing similar kind of delays. So it's only expected that someone who has more barriers to being able to speak is going to obviously have a harder time with it. And so it's just amazing to me that we're able to overlook all of these huge problems we see with teenage girls, these exponential suicide rates, anxiety, depression, and all of these things. And just people who younger kids who are in school, especially when it gets to elementary school kids. And so when you see that you're robbing kids of almost their childhoods, where they have to sit 6 feet apart for lunch and they can't really play in the playground together, and they're taping off swings, people are going to grow up and remember that. And they're going to look back at the data from all of this, and they're going to go, you're going to tell me that as a child with no underlying health conditions, nothing at all, and I had practically a 0% chance of death, that 2 years of my childhood was just completely robbed when it's already probably 10 years max.
Exactly. And it's a complete just ignoring of common sense.
Yeah.
When you're teaching a little kid how to speak, what do they need? They need to be able to see your mouth mockingly. Yeah. When you're teaching them how to read, they need to be able to clearly hear you and see your expressions. And it's every little detail along the way. And it's not like students are oh, I want to wear a mask. It's blatant ignoring of absolute common sense.
Yeah. And, going off on that common sense thing, also, another way that this is completely harming children in the worst possible ways is the Wall Street Journal released a report. It was authored by this public health expert researcher. And I believe it's a she. I'm not quite sure. It's kind of a gender. Erin, E-R-A-N, Ben David. So sorry, Erin, if I offended you by using the wrong gender. It could be a she and she still wants to be a he. So I don't know.
Hey, you never know.
I mean, it's your fault for spelling your name.
I don't even know why I'm going out of my way to worry about this. But basically what that Wall Street Journal report found is that by being so intensely in just cleaning, the intensification of hygienic policies, by, all the masking, cleaning everything so thoroughly, kids aren't building up their immune systems. There's going to be severe health consequences for that in the future. Increasing rates of asthma, allergies, type 1 diabetes, Crohn's disease, and other diseases with significant autoimmune components to them. And that's just another thing that You could have asked anybody.
Well, yeah.
And that's common sense that kids need to get a little sick sometimes to build up that immunity.
Yeah, kids are meant like as little human beings. They're meant to be like rolling around in the dirt and falling off of rocks.
Right.
And because that's how you build everything in your body. It's how you build your immunity, your sensory perceptions, your mobility. And it's like they have to have access to all of that. Or else, they're not going to develop.
Yeah. And so, why is Biden sticking with these policies when we know they do so much harm? Well, in this next clip we're going to show you, he kind of explains his thinking behind staying behind this stuff.
Are you afraid, though, that some states and cities are moving too quickly to loosen indoor mask mandates?
Well, it's I committed that I would follow the science as put forward by the CDC and the federal people. And I think it's probably premature, but it's a tough call.
The science put forward by the CDC and the federal people.
Yeah. Who are the federal people, by the way?
Who are the federal people?
Who are they?
I would assume it's Biden and Fauci and all of those fun folks. If the science is only put forward by two groups, it's not actually science. That's not exactly how that works.
Well, yeah, and it's dumb too, because didn't the CDC basically say unless you're wearing a KN95, masks are pretty much useless?
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then it's like you look.
That's a great point, Tara. Yeah.
It's like you look at these like kindergartners and you're stressing them out. I mean, first of all, go into any room of kindergartners and tell them to sit still for an hour. That's your first issue.
It's impossible.
You want kindergartners to sit still for an hour? Oh, and then also like keep your face mask on and do whatever. It's like kindergartners fidget. They don't know how to contain themselves. They don't know how to do anything.
Yeah.
And so you're just putting all of these kinds of constraints on it. It's just ridiculous. And that's the thing that like just makes me so mad about this video is that the CDC literally said unless you're wearing a KN95, then you're basically, it's not really doing anything.
Yeah.
So it's like you're not even following the science. Be like, oh, yeah, I mean, they're not really helping. At least if you go, at least they're not really helping that much, but working on getting KN95s, which would still be ridiculous, but at least consistent with what the CDC actually says. I don't know. That's my little...
I've said from the beginning, and, we've known about a lot of this masking stuff from like pretty early on. And it's just now that the CDC has come around to it.
2 years later, folks.
City Journal, they had kind of one of their public health experts do a rundown of basically all of the scientific literature, all the studies that the CDC was using to base its recommendations on. And, none of them had that much long-term sustainable, like it just... They weren't concrete studies. And there were plenty of other studies that you could point to that were just as, reliable that were saying the opposite things about masking. So this was never, trusting the CDC science is not trusting the CDC science. Trusting the CDC science is trusting the opinions of a certain group of people that all have their own biases and all have this just certain particular expertise that, they should not have the right to be, making policy proposals.